Hi, I'm Kenneth from Friends of the Earth. I wasn't originally meant to be speaking. It's only worked in sort of at the last minute because Josie from Global Witness unfortunately couldn't make it today because I think she's got a slip disc or something. So you'll be glad I won't actually be speaking so much. Instead, I'm going to show you a film about a land grab in Uganda, a huge land grab for palm oil that's happening over there, where our Friends of the Earth in Uganda, they're doing a lot of work around this. And then afterwards, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we are trying to do here in the UK to tackle these problems. So I'm just going to start the film. Okay, so that was the film about the impact. So one of the questions that we had in the film was this question, so what can we do? And that's sort of a question we ask ourselves as well, like what can we as Friends of the Earth, England, Wales and Northern Ireland do here to have an impact on land grabbing? And there's sort of three kind of main areas that we work on in this context. So we work with our Friends of the Earth groups in Liberia, Uganda and other countries to work directly to help them kind of build resistance against the land grabbers. Although I have to say they're doing a very good job without us, so we shouldn't really claim too much on that front. What we are also doing is working on biofuels. So Europe's demand for biofuels is one of the big drivers for these land grabs. It's not the only driver, but it is one really important one, and it's actually one that is entirely driven by policies, and where at the same time policies could also stop this. I'm not going to talk about biofuels. I could talk about biofuels for hours if you wanted to. I'm not going to do that for now. So the third focus of our work is to look at where's the money coming from for these companies. So a lot of the companies who are doing the land grabs are actually quite small companies. Surprisingly, they're sort of small startup companies with two, three people who have very little, often have little experience in agriculture. But they're very good at sort of getting money. They're good at talking to investors and getting them to back them. And one of the sort of big investors in these land grabs are institutional investors like pensions, which is very interesting. So pensions get our money and then they don't know what to do with it. So they want to invest it in something that gives them a high profit, high return, and they look at these land grabs or lands in general and think that's going to give them a lot of a big return. So what we started was to look at pensions specifically, and also local authority pensions in particular. So we published a briefing, which is actually not called Risky Business. That is actually called Shaky Ground. But it's a briefing for investors, and it's talking about the risk to investors, because the money they're investing is actually at a high risk, because where land rights are uncertain, conflict is often following, which is actually a very bad investment for them as well. But we did this primarily because we wanted to have some incentives for them to talk to us. We sent this briefing out to about 100 pension funds and asset managers. We haven't had a lot of government coming back, I'll be very honest about this. So we're finding this very difficult. And also it is very difficult to find out any information about where pension funds are actually putting their money, because they don't have to tell you anything, and they usually don't. So we also tried supporters writing to their pension funds directly with very sort of varying levels of success. Mostly they didn't get a lot of useful information, which is now, while we're slightly shifting our focus and looking at local authority pension funds, because there we can use freedom of information requests, because local authority have to give you that information. Sorry, yeah, I jumped over this earlier. So these are some of the key risks in our briefing to investors. Obviously, their land purchase, potentially can be overturned. The operations can be disrupted because of sort of unrest. There's mispricing of the investment due to insufficient environmental impact assessments, human rights violations. That obviously is not good for the image, and sort of policy changes, which, for example, in the case of biofuels, could make their investment invalid. So, yeah, sort of, key questions for our discussions with pension funds and generally are sort of, what are the risks to those that seek to invest in land, but also to the people who actually live on that land. How can we encourage investors to ensure that their investments aren't funding land grabs? But particularly for us, what are the levers for change in the investment chain, which I've already kind of highlighted? It's actually really difficult, partly because also of the lengths of this investment chain. So you don't have someone, usually it's not like someone's got money and buys land. They give the money to an asset manager, and the asset manager is then investing in a company, and the company is then buying the land. Or that chain can be even much longer than that. So this is really an ongoing challenge for us, how we can best have an effect in there. And then also, what sort of legislation and governance do we need, and how is it enforceable? What the role can processes like RI play in this? Again, sort of an ongoing question for us, and we don't necessarily have the answers, so I'd rather put some questions here for a broader discussion later.
We heard two testimonies from people from Uganda, and the stories about keeping the seats amongst the women and smallholders.